Nowhere else would you find this style of music and this much variety. 600 AM. The station that's so easy to listen to all day. 600 AM.
Soft favorites, soft rock. If the people you work with can't agree on what station to listen to at work, try 600 AM. Great music to work by without sounding boring and bland. Vancouver's new at-work choice. The unforgettable 600 AM.
Good evening. My name is Jerry Siemens, and I'm the Vice President General Manager for CKBD 600 AM. I'd like to take a moment to chat with you and to say thank you for the many years you've given us as devoted listeners of 600 AM. However, we've come to a defining moment in Vancouver radio history, and in a few minutes, we must bid farewell to CKBD 600 AM. In May of this year, the Pattison Broadcast Group received approval from the CRTC to convert CKBD to an FM frequency at 100.5. The new station will be called The Peak, and it will be signing on very soon. 600 AM has been part of the Vancouver landscape for more than 80 years, and we would like to mark this very special occasion by paying tribute to this very special part of our history. Regrettably, time will not allow us to mention everyone who has passed through these doors as part of their radio career, but we would like to share some highlights and names you're sure to recognize. And now, a look back at the history of 600 AM.
The year was 1924, and New Westminster Alderman Fred Hume had a vision to start a radio station. And so began CFXC, which sprang to life for about 2 hours each night with a whopping 10 watts of power at 440 on the AM dial. The following year, CFXC moved to 1030 on the dial and increased power to 20 watts. In July of 1926, Mr. Hume sold CFXC to radio engineer George Chandler and his brother Art. The Chandlers quickly moved the station to Vancouver, and a new license was issued under the call letter CJOR, which was apparently the closest available call letter combination to George. It operated with 50 watts from a transmitter located near the old Marpole Bridge, with broadcasts originating from the St. Julian Hotel. The historic CJOR call letters would be in place until 1988. Early broadcasting was all done live, with such features as music by John Avison, the girl baritone Laddie Watkus, and newscasts by noted newspaper reporter Charles Defoe. In 1930, studios moved to rooms above the Alexandra Ballroom, and later in the year to the Grosvenor Hotel at 840 Howe Street. That year, CJOR changed positions on the dial from 1030 to 1210 and increased power to 500 watts. It was during this era that personalities really started to surface at CJOR. There were broadcasts by William Uncle Billy Hassel with a country music show, child actors and singers Art Jones and Ray Peters, along with his brother Wally, who became program director. October 1st, 1933, CJOR moved to the familiar 600 position on the AM dial, where it has remained until this day. CJOR was at the forefront as the 1930s progressed, with entertainment programs by Canada's big band king, Mart Kenny, and educational broadcasts such as High Schools on Parade, hosted by broadcast pioneer Jack Stark. Vancouverites were able to tune in for live sports coverage by Leo Nicholson, the voice of lacrosse for the New Westminster Salmon Bellies, and the amateur Pacific Coast Hockey League Vancouver Canucks. The voice of the races, Jack Short, started as the announcer at Vancouver's horse racing tracks in 1934, a position he kept until 1976. During that time, he called nearly 50,000 races with this familiar sound.
There they go! And a wait of a good start. Sarroworth is going to the front down the backstretch with Sarroworth in front by 3/4 of a length. Matako is second by a head. Craig Lockhart is third on the outside.
Doug Gourlay became chief announcer at CJOR, and news coverage became a mainstay during the 30s, such as this one by Dick Diesbecker in 1937.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Dick Diesbecker with the latest world news from the wires of Canadian press and British United Press. A London newspaper has predicted the possibility of a complete 24-hour electricity blackout throughout the whole of England.
Entertainment expanded during the late 30s with programs such as Bill Ray's Ranger's Cabin, and included radio drama such as The Lux Radio Theatre with Bernie Braden, Fletcher Markle, Alan Young, John Draney, and a young Juliet. The King of Swing, big band musician Dal Richards, performed in the Signal Oil Carnival and After Dark. programs that were later fed to Eastern Canada.
For the past 30 minutes, your musical host along CBC Dominion has been Dal Richards with his band at the top of the town, the panorama roof of the Hotel Vancouver. Songs were by Dal and Burl Boden. Bud Henderson was at the piano.
Also heard during the 30s was country and western singer Evan Kemp, and programs such as Definition of Swing with Bob Smith, who later hosted Hot Air on CBC Radio. In 1938, Colin Fitzgerald started hosting mornings as the Gigi Man, with characters Miss Pumpernickel, Rastus, and Fooey. He also hosted a news and pop music program, Gigi's Informalities. He stayed with CJOR until 1955. In 1941, CJOR's power was increased to 1,000 watts, and the same year, Vic Waters became an operator-announcer at CJOR. He hosted The Concert Hour, was a pop music DJ, and later program director until his retirement from radio in 1969. Vic is credited with hiring an amazing roster of radio talent during his years at the station. CJOR continued to dominate Vancouver airwaves during the 1940s with programs such as Varsity Time with Dorwin Baird and O'Brien's Ghost with Mickey O'Brien. In the fall of 1943, Armed Forces veteran Arthur Helps founded, directed, and moderated the weekly program Town Meeting in Canada, and at the peak of its popularity was broadcast on over 30 radio stations in Canada. A major new development occurred on January 1, 1944, as CBC Radio started the Dominion Network, with CJOR as its local affiliate. Here's a Dominion Network CJOR identification from that time.
This is the Dominion Network of the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. CJOR, Vancouver.
The grand old man of Canadian radio, pioneer William J. Billy Brown, hosted the Remember When series on CJOR Vancouver from 1944 to 51. Here's a short excerpt from one of his programs.
545 Seymour Street, Vancouver, British Columbia. The deadline is next Friday at noon. And the prize offered this week by Stewart's on Seymour is a cretonne-covered slipper chair. And the contest is open to everybody, everywhere.
News, drama, and entertainment continued in the mid-40s with familiar names such as Larry McCants, Gordon Reed, Keith Cutler, Billy Brown Jr., Barney Potts, Dave Hill, and Bob Tweedy, who hosted Rodeo Rhythm and wrote Western Trails, which was fed over the Dominion Network. Also heard were sports reporters Bill Stevenson, Ray Perot, and Jerry Wilmot, along with the International Woodworkers of America program Green Gold with teacher Al Parkin. Power was increased in 1947 to 5,000 watts. Canada's big band king, Mart Kenny, returned to Vancouver from Toronto to host the Mart Kenny Talent Contest on September 18, 1948 at the Forum.
From Vancouver's Exhibition Forum, CJOR presents the finals of the Mart Kenny Talent Quest with the music of Mart Kenny and his Western Gentlemen.
CJOR is very proud to welcome Mart Kenny back to Vancouver, particularly so because this is the station that first presented the Western Gentlemen on the air quite a few years ago. In a moment, Mart will step up to introduce our talent guest finals. But first, here's a bright opening from the orchestra, Put 'em in a Box.
The talent stream continued during the 1950s with host Myron Balagno, Chinese girl disc jockey Ling Toy, Bob Gillies, Lloyd Hoole, Telford Oliver, Harvey Lowe hosting Call of China, news reporter Ross Mortimer, who also hosted Burns Chuckwagon, and Theme for Teens host Al Jordan. Hard-hitting journalist Jack Webster entertained audiences with his familiar Scottish brogue. Here's classic Webster during the police chief Walter Mulligan affair in 1955.
And that is City Mike for tonight. And now we must wait and watch and hear and examine the public inquiry which is to be held in the courthouse as soon as possible into the state of affairs of Vancouver's police department. And this is your reporter, Jack Webster, saying thank you and good night.
Chris Crombie co-hosted with Jack Webster on the program That's a Fair Question. Program director Vic Waters hired a young Red Robinson to host the Theme for Teens program. Another amazing talent hired at CJOR was Brian Frosty Forrest. Here he is in 1957.
Well, hi to you once again on this nice, damp afternoon. 2 minutes after 5 the time right now. Brian Forrest here with your hit parade from CJOR. And look at the songs that are doing pretty big things on the national chart. The bestsellers on the North American continent, according to the most played in jukeboxes, most sold at record stores, and according to Cashbox and Billboard magazine.
Also heard on CJOR during the 50s were Uncle Joe Chesney, and a gospel music program hosted by Jerry Scott. In 1960, CJOR stepped up its news coverage, with Jim Nielsen coming in to anchor morning news. Also added to the newsroom during the decade were Carl Ways, John Ashbridge, Bob Gillingham, Peter Kent, Mike Halloran, Clark Housley, Patrick Monroe, Arnold Epp, Mark Raines, George Wilson, and George Finstad.
The weather forecast reads cloudy today with a few showers, little change in temperature, wind southeast 15. The low tonight 48, the high Tuesday 60. Downtown it's currently 57 degrees. George Finstad, next news at 30.
Then, a tragic day at CJOR, as owner George Chandler died April 20th, 1962, in Vancouver at age 56. The station was subsequently taken over by his widow, Marie. In the 1960s, CJOR became a major force in talk radio, with a number of colorful celebrities, including the first female host, J.J. McCall, Dave Abbott, Jim Crossan with Crossfire, and the famous Burns Hotline with gravelly-voiced talk show host Pat Burns.
Pat Burns, radio station CJOR, Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. I had a hotliner on the other day. This is called the Hotline Show, and people who get on are generally referred to as hotliners throughout the state of Washington and British Columbia.
Another important hire was Fred Latrimo, who gained a large following as host of the afternoon teen music program. In 1964, controversial open line shows came under the microscope of the Board of Broadcast Governors, or BBG. The BBG forced an ownership reorganization of CJOR. The ruling, released on September 23, 1965, caused the station to be turned over to local entrepreneur and auto dealer Jim Pattison and Vancouver businessman Ralph Cunningham. CJOR was the first radio station in the Pattison Broadcast Group, which has grown to include 29 radio and 3 TV stations throughout British Columbia and Alberta.